Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 360, Symbiopsychotaxiplasm, 2 takes by William Greaves. Take 1 was released in 1968 and take 2.5 was released in 2005. Where to begin with this? First off, what the hell is a Symbiopsychotaxiplasm? Well, this was based on, okay. The film itself was a kind of creative thought experiment or creative thought idea on the part of William Greaves. William Greaves started out as an actor. And then decided he wanted to do more with film and wanted to become a director. But as he was born African American, and it was kind of difficult to go down that road. He needed to go somewhere else to pursue that path, and he ended up going north to Canada and got involved with working in the National Film Board of Canada, starting off with editing and getting involved in that way. And he was also, I don't know if this came after, but he also got involved with the Actors Studio. I think this is when he came back to the United States. He got involved with the Actors Studios, but he also started his own acting school while he was up there in Canada as a way to support himself. He had been involved in enough documentaries and films that he felt that he was trained enough or ready enough to pursue other projects and to go back to the United States. He worked with the United Nations on several cultural projects. He was involved in a television series that was done to promote the interest of African Americans, and even helped to spearhead that if you're going to run a show about African Americans, it should be run by African Americans, not be a minority. In that, a minority in your own project, that's not particularly good. But so already at this point, by 1968, he was very productive in what he was doing. But he also, in the midst of all this, he found time to conjure this idea of wanting to do a film that reflected a lot of his own intellectual interests. In addition to being a hard worker, he was a very avid reader, and he was always interested in learning about the world. And so, combining sociology, a little bit of quantum mechanics, which, yes, anybody who says that they know about anything about quantum mechanics is lying. Thank you, Richard Feynman. But also, it's not, some of the ideas don't translate well to real life, which actually that's the whole point of the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, is to demonstrate that it's absurd to try to imagine the laws and theories concerning quantum mechanics to apply to the real world, because it's going to create some gross paradox. It's not to say that they're wrong, it's just that, don't try to apply them into large scale. So basically the lawyers in the man who wasn't there, the whole Heisenberg uncertainty principle makes a lousy legal defense, and thankfully the jury found out about this, but I digress. So anyways, this film was basically a result of varying interests. Well, not only just in terms of quantum mechanics and sociology, but also just in terms of acting theory, namely like Steinberg and the Actors School and Stanislavski, and he was trying to put all of these together. And the end result is Symbiopsychotaxiplasm. And take one is the scenario, as it were. This is one of those films where there's a lot that goes on. It's really hard to kind of really succinct. But basically what it is, there's a film crew that's working on a script, and they're filming this in Central Park, and it's this breakup scene. It's this argument within this couple, and they're filming it in so many different ways, trying to get as many different angles and takes, and making sure that the emotion is there, and making sure that the dialogue comes through, and the whole thing's kind of banal anyways, but purposely so. This is a guy that knew about the Actors Studio, so he's been in enough plays, and he's seen enough stuff to know what a good dialogue is and what bad dialogue is. So this is all very purposeful. But anyway, so it starts with this film crew, and then there's another film crew that's filming the filming. So already we get into meta territory, and you can see why this is. And it's only more. It's only in the past couple of decades when this film started to get a lot of attention, and it's become one of those hidden gems, as it were, of American cinema, in a lot of different categories. Certainly in avant-garde, certainly in documentary, certainly in African American cinema, and it's something that encompasses a lot of different groups and transcends a lot of groups, which is nice. But anyways, and it's easy to see the uncertainty principle at play, and probably the best single moment. Well, there's actually a lot of really good moments, but the one that really stuck out to me the first time I saw this was there's a moment where you had 3 cameras going on, and you see the 3 different shots all within one frame. So you just see one shot, you see one from one camera, then the other camera, then the other camera. And it's a scene that plays out, and it's all happening at the same time. And it's that overwhelming feeling of being bombarded with a lot of information. And because normally when you move, it's just all in one perspective, but here you get to see multiple perspectives all occurring at the same time. And it becomes a very exciting, visceral, and quite frankly overwhelming experience to take in all of this information at once. This is something that you're not normally used to processing. And that's also a very good demonstration of some principles and ideas that you find in quantum mechanics. Again, not all of it translates very well into our scale, but this is why you have these little thought experiments like Schrodinger's cat. But again, I digress. This is a film where it's very easy to digress, and there's even a point where the crew is figures out that there's something really wrong with this production, and they're talking about how Bill doesn't seem to get it, and he's kind of confused about his material, and I'm not really sure what's going on and everything. And then they start to, but actually they realize that maybe there's a method to the madness, and that maybe that was the point, is to be confused and to start this discussion. And so take one in general explores has a grand scope, considering that this is all very localized within this film crew, actually with these 2 film crews, all within Central Park, in a couple of days at Central Park, trying to film this scene. And so the emphasis is much more on the meta, on the nature of filmmaking, and the things like the observer effect and relationship dynamics, and that's part of where the term Symbiopsychotaxiplasm comes in. It started from a sociological term, and I forget for the life of me what exactly it's supposed to describe. I think it's supposed to. I think it indicates a self-sustaining social unit is what a Symbiopsychotaxiplasm is, or the nature of a social unit. And then the psycho was an addition that William Greaves added to emphasize that this was more on a subconscious level, that this is like a meeting of minds. Oh, I think I got this. I think Symbiopsychotaxiplasm is a social unit made up of different parts that all function as a cohesive whole. And then the psycho is supposed to illustrate the undercurrents, and this is a term that he devised. So, but if you definitely like avant-garde and like pondering the meta of everything, and considering, again, this was made in 1968, and this was made pretty much independently of other things that were going on. I mean, there were plenty of other avant-garde filmmakers around the time, but there really wasn't anything this extensive. And considering that this came about because of one man's interest in a lot of different things, including acting theory and quantum mechanics and sociology, and then by some extension psychology. To, you know, when you go into acting theory, you have to go into a little bit of psychology. It's all of those things kind of coming together in this wonderfully chaotic explosion of meta commentary. It sounds like I'm deriding it. Far from it. I mean, it's quite fascinating to watch, but boy oh boy, is it a wild ride. He also likens it to jazz, and to really make the point, you hear excerpts from the Miles Davis LP, In a Silent Way. So that's take one. Now what's take 2.5, and where does the half come from? Well, I think his original idea was to try to do as multiple takes as he could, but the issue is always getting money. And it was in one of the festival showings that it was brought to, I believe it was to Steven Soderbergh's attention, that he noticed it's like, well, it says take one. Why does it take one? Like, where's all the other takes? And so, since he had some money and since he loves film, he started investing in the next sequel, as it were. And the 2.5 comes from because half of it consists of footage that was shot at the time of take one, but were not used. So it's using that, and then there's new footage that was done, that was made in 2003. And the emphasis, whereas take one dealt with more, had a very broad scope, take 2.5 deals more with the acting method. And it focuses much more on the acting theory, whereas it was there in take one, but it was there but it was only one facet of many different facets. There's also some politically charged stuff as well. Some of the dialogue was meant to be code for the U.S. involvement in Vietnam, for instance, and other kinds of things. But in take 2.5, the emphasis is much more on acting theory. The Stanislavski on acting and so on, and particularly method acting. And where is that line between playing a character and playing yourself as a character? So on the one hand, and particularly when you see, and I kind of made this mistake the first time I saw it, I felt a little underwhelmed by 2.5, but mainly it was because one dealt with a lot of different things. It was very, very exciting. This is not particularly, you don't get the barrage of information like you do in take one, but what you do have is something a little bit more interesting. In fact, it's a bit more intimate and personal, and it deals with, I think, much more with the relationship aspect in a very personal way, whereas in take one it's more of a larger scope, even though it's still dealing with a very small geography, namely New York City's Central Park. But I'd say that if you are the adventurous type, if you like your meta commentaries, and if you like cinema that likes to do more than just tell a straightforward story, this is definitely up your alley. And it really is worth watching and viewing. And even if you're not interested, it's not, the interesting thing about it is that while there is a lot of stuff and it may seem very jumbled, at the same time it is very approachable. It's probably the most approachable avant-garde film that I've ever come across. I'm sure there are a few others, but this certainly has it's easy to approach the material because the concept of it is actually quite simple. What you're looking at is you're looking at a film being made, and kind of and in that respect, it's one of the you can consider this one of the great films about filmmaking, along with Vertov's The Man with the Movie Camera and Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt. Considering that Contempt is out of print, this is probably the closest you're going to get to meta filmmaking commentary. But so yeah, don't let the title intimidate you. It's definitely worth checking out. Again, especially if you're the adventurous type, and even if you're not the adventurous type, this is a fairly easy adventure to take. So, Symbiopsychotaxiplasm. And until next time, take care.